Hi, everyone. We are live. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. And I'm here tonight with Brenda Piazza from College Assistance Plus. We're talking about financial aid appeals. Of course, there has been a ton that has happened this week related to colleges, related to college admissions. We actually planned this Facebook Live a few weeks ago, not knowing that all of this upheaval would happen. So we're continuing with what we've planned. And you might have questions we may not be able to answer because of all the changes that have happened. And, all we can do is hear your questions and maybe come back if we don't have an answer right now and research it or and come back with answers later. But just wanted you to know that we're going to try our best. Ask whatever questions you have. If we've got the answer, we'll provide it. If not, we'll come back later with some information. So I always like to give people a few minutes to kind of log on. If people are here, if you want to just put something in the comments, say hi, tell us where you're from. I'm assuming most of the people who are watching tonight are going to have college seniors. If you want to, hoping that you've gotten some of your acceptances already, that's great. Tell us whatever you want. We just want to know you're there. And I know people are watching because I see the numbers. And I'm going to let Brenda introduce herself for a little bit before we kind of dig into the meat of what we're going to talk about tonight. So welcome, Brenda. Tell us a little bit about yourself and College Assistance Plus.
Thank you. I'm Brenda Piazza, and I'm from Honeoye Falls, which is south of Rochester, New York. That's where our office is located. I have been working with College Assistance Plus for about 7.5 years, and am very passionate about working with my students and with my families. College Assistance Plus, we began about 15 years ago. And it's ironic that although we do everything in the college process, from the college search to career exploration, the whole financial piece. It's ironic that when we started 15 years ago, the owner of our company started this business with a partner because he had gone through this process with their own children, writing appeal letters for families. And that's how the business got started.
Which, interrupt, was probably so unusual back then.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It was something that they made a lot of mistakes along the way, these two men with their families, and then they realized this is something they could do, and they wanted to share that with other people. So that's how the business started. So we have 15 years of writing appeal letters to families. So yeah, so College Assistance Plus, 15 years, and we're still here going strong and helping families plan for college.
Great. Okay, so we're going to dig in. Brenda put together a presentation. I see a lot of comments, which I know people are watching, and that is great. If you have a question, put it in the comments. If I think it's like appropriate to stop Brenda, I'll stop her and say that there's some questions. Sure. If not, we might just hold them to the end, but we're going to try and get through everything, as much as we can. So, okay, I'm switching over to our presentation.
Okay, so you all know that this presentation is about the college appeal. What is an appeal? An appeal is an opportunity to go back to the college and see if you are able to get some additional money from them, whether it's need-based or a scholarship. Before we get into the college appeal discussion, there are just a few terms that I want you to be familiar with. One is the financial aid package. So many of you probably have seniors, they've received their financial aid letters, and the financial aid includes information like loans, scholarships, grants, work study, and you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, I can't afford this. So maybe they'll give you a little bit more money. Well, then the trick is to write an effective appeal letter to them. Looking for maybe scholarships. A scholarship, as you know, is awarded to the student based on their academics. Could be athletic, could be music, art, grant. A grant is awarded, you'll see that on your financial aid letter, if your student qualifies. So a grant is free money. It's awarded to students based upon the results of your FAFSA. the free application for federal student aid. So scholarships and grants are free money. Then you might also see the loans on your financial aid package. What I'm referring to are the student direct loans, the federal loans. They are also listed on a financial aid letter. We know, you and I know, that we don't consider loans aid, but the colleges do. Work study is another source of aid. Again, it's not a credit to your account. It's money that's awarded to a student based on need. If they qualify, they could, if they work, they could earn money on a work study position. And then the last term I'd like you to think about is out-of-pocket cost and how that's calculated. And be sure to use these elements: tuition, mandatory fees, and room and board. Subtract your scholarship and grant to come up with your out-of-pocket cost, because the scholarship and the grant, remember, they're free money.
So, Brenda, let me.
Yes.
The mandatory fees, will that always be listed on the financial aid offer?
So typically, all of the fees that a family will be charged for will not be listed typically. Only one I've ever seen listed the individual detailed fees. Usually you don't see all those fees until you receive your bill in August. So what you're going to see is tuition and maybe the word fees or direct fees. You really don't know what those are until you receive your bill in August. So that's a good question.
Yeah, so that's a little scary, or it's a little hard for people to really come up with their true out-of-pocket cost without having that final bill in front of them.
Correct. And the other thing that could happen is that even though you'll notice on a lot of the financial aid letters that you'll see the words estimated costs, which means that they're giving you probably a pretty close estimation, but the costs could change. You could see some different numbers on there when you do receive your bill in the August timeframe.
Okay, I'm just going to go back because there was a few questions already off of the first slide that I think are worth addressing. Okay, here. Melissa said, it's my understanding that work study is not actually guaranteed.
So work study, if you see it on your financial aid package, it's awarded to a student if they qualify for need-based aid. So it's according to the results of the FAFSA. And so only students who qualify for need are awarded work study. And as you know, the price can range, the award can range anywhere from like $1,000 to $3,000. And typically there are jobs available on campus that are work study positions. If you can't find a work study position and it turns out that there isn't one available, there's usually other jobs on campus that are available that might not be considered work study. So I've never really come across a student who couldn't find a job, either work study or otherwise.
Okay, that's good to know. Here was another question, and we might get into this later, but maybe you just want to touch on it quickly.
Okay.
Can you ask for more money, more merit at D3 schools?
I would say yes, you absolutely can. It depends. Is it state? Is it a public school or private school? It would depend on the school. I know that, the state schools are limited because they just don't have the endowment to offer those any more funds. But quite often we see D3 private schools offering more aid in response to an appeal letter. Yes.
Okay, I'm just looking at some of these other questions already. And again, I'm just going to put this up, but if we're going to address it later, then just kind of say that we'll address it later.
Okay.
David's asking, is it worth appealing to a public school as an out-of-state student?
Sometimes public schools will offer a reasonable package to an out-of-state school. Is it worth appealing? I'm about to do that tomorrow. You just asked a question that a mom texted me today, and I'm going to be sending an appeal letter to as a state school in Michigan, and they're a New York State resident. So I'm going to try real hard to get some more money for them. I think it's absolutely worth it. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, whoops, sorry, I'm just trying to find, to remove that. Okay, so let's go on.
Okay, so I think we've covered all the definitions here. So what does your financial award mean in dollars and cents? Well, we're going to take the college costs, tuition, room, board, and direct fees that we said before. And I'm going to use an example here. So here's the cost of $68,050. Now, this student happened to receive a merit scholarship at $15,000. Remember, this is annual, and a college grant of $12,000. Now, this student received a grant because this student happened to qualify for need-based aid based upon the results of the FAFSA. Note that the Merit Scholarship is awarded for 4 years typically. Always make sure you read your letters that you receive from the colleges to make sure that it is an annual award. But most of the time, I would say they're awarded on an annual basis. Just make sure that as a student that they maintain the GPA required to keep that scholarship. The college grant, as I said, based on the FAFSA, that can change. So if you're estimating your costs for the next 4 years, and your income goes up, your grant could go down. If your income goes down, it's possible that your grant could increase. So make sure you watch that carefully. Now, your out-of-pocket, $41,050. Remember the costs, minus the free money of merit scholarships and college grants, gives you your out-of-pocket cost. That's $41,050 a year. Now, if you take that and multiply it times 4, because what you want to do is estimate that for 4 years, you're not going to get 177,050. Excuse me, 177,000. What I've done is I've included the estimated increases per year. I included, I believe, a 3.1% increase. Colleges increase their prices between 3 and 6% a year. That's why you need to take that into consideration when you're estimating your out-of-pocket costs over the 4 years.
So this is such an important slide.
Mm-hmm.
Oop, I think is there feedback on your end? Are you getting any feedback?
I'm not receiving any feedback.
Okay. I was going to say this is such an important slide because most people just look at their costs for the first year.
Correct.
And they really need to look at 4 years of what it's going to cost. And I love, I mean, I hate to say love, but it's so important that you also highlighted that you need to factor in an increase in tuition every year. That's just the reality. And if you didn't do that, you could really get stung, like later on, realizing that by the 4th year, things might have gone up, 8 or 9%.
That's correct. It could end up costing you $14,000 to $20,000 more over 4 years if you're not taking into consideration that annual increase. Very important.
Okay, just seeing if there's a ton of questions.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get to them, but I'm just seeing if there's if we should do any now. Okay. Here's one from Melinda. Can you appeal the FAFSA amount? For example, if a step-parent's income had to be included but won't be contributing to the student's education at all?
Gosh, I'm afraid that the answer to that question is that the FAFSA, they're not very flexible in terms of, oh, nice family picture, I see. They're not very flexible in terms of whether or not they'll include the step-parent income. They absolutely will include that.
Yeah, so FAFSA, like whatever you get as your EFC is your EFC unless you've made a mistake.
Correct.
So that's
doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair that they do that. But I know for a fact I've been reviewing FAFSAs for so many years, and they absolutely include the step-parent's income.
Yeah. Okay, Mandy is asking, can you lose work study if you get too much outside scholarship money?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. So when you get the financial aid package, the financial aid that you are awarded is based upon your need. And if you're awarded work study, it's based on need. If you're awarded a grant, it's based on need. Many colleges, not all colleges, and you need to call to find out the answer to this question, many colleges will subtract the amount of outside scholarships or financial aid from the scholarships that are already offered. I would say that I would never heard of a college taking away work study in response to the receiving a merit scholar or a private scholarship from the outside. I've never heard of work study, but I have heard of colleges decreasing the amount of grant money based upon an outside private scholarship being sent to the school. If you're concerned about work study, it could be on a school by school basis, and I think it would be a good idea to call the college and ask that question to them directly. And I would call financial aid to ask that question.
Yeah, that unfortunately, anything related to private scholarships and how colleges handle it is going to vary school by school.
Correct.
Here's another interesting one. We had some schools award work study, but others did not. Is that common?
Yes, because remember when you fill out your FAFSA. When you fill out your FAFSA, it calculates your expected family contribution. Now, regardless of what school you apply to, your expected family contribution will remain the same, regardless of the school. But your need, that's what's in question here. If you have an expected family contribution of, say, $30,000, and you apply to a state school, you won't qualify for any need-based aid and will not qualify for a work-study position. However, if you apply to a college that is greater than your expected family contribution, so if you apply to a $60,000 school and your EFC is $30,000, your student could qualify for a work study. That's how that works. It's purely based on need and how the colleges see that need and whether or not you qualify for a work study position. So yes, you could qualify at one school and not at another.
Okay. Here's a question about a lot of people have. I'm just going to put it up, but I think we should discuss it at the end.
Okay.
Basically, Joel's asking, how should we expect this crazy year to be different? Colleges are closed. We used to go to accepted freshman day. Absolutely. At the end, I'll just share whatever information I have learned, and we can hypothesize, but I think it's best to wait to the end, but I'm sure a lot of people have that type of question.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Okay, we can go to the next screen. Thank you. So using this same example, this undergraduate degree could potentially cost $177,000 over 4 years. So then you need to ask yourself the question, well, how much is too much debt? Let's weigh the value of the education or the value of the program to the debt that my student or parents could end up facing someday. If the parents have no money saved to contribute toward this education, it could potentially cost $177,000 out of pocket. And if it were all put on the student, that could be a $1,700 per month loan payment, and we don't want that. Now, I do want to mention that while students can take out the government loan in over 4 years, it's a maximum of $31,000 over that undergraduate degree period, they cannot take out private loans on their own. My point to you is I want to stress here that this could be a $177,000 education and the loan payment of $1,700 per month. And this is something to be taken very seriously because that debt could stay with the family of the student or the parents for the rest of their lives.
And I missed it. Did you, with the calculation you did of $1,700 per month for loan payment, over how many years is that?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I apologize. 10 years. That's a 10-year, $1,700 per month loan payment. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the type of calculation that, again, we don't all do. I mean, first of all, most people look at 1 year. So now we're encouraging everyone to look at 4 years and then take the potential 4-year borrowing amount that you might have to do and then convert it to a monthly payment. I think that's what starts to really hit home when you look at what the monthly dollar amount is that you're going to have to cover.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see some questions we have. Okay. Christy's asking, have you seen anyone able to get additional money for a private school using a state school financial aid package? In other words, asking the private school to match the cost of attendance of a state school?
To answer your question, when writing an appeal letter, we never ask a school to meet another school's package. We don't believe that that's an effective way of asking for funds. What we want to make sure, yes, you can ask a private school through an appeal letter for additional funds. We have used state schools as a leverage, for sure, but we certainly don't ask them to meet the difference, to fund the gap and meet that cost of a state school. I'm afraid that they might just look at that and turn it down. That's a bit aggressive, as much as you'd like to see it happen.
So it's obviously worth appealing, but maybe not ask them to match exactly another school.
Correct. It's definitely worth appealing to, but you have to limit. You have to be careful how much you ask for, because if you ask for too much, they'll just turn it down.
Here's an interesting question from Lisa. One of the schools offers a lock-in rate in tuition. It's approximately $25,000 more per year, but it offers a lock-in. Is that a good option?
Well, I've seen this before, and you really just need to do the math. So if you were to do, remember I mentioned before the cost of the increases are 3 to 6%. Most families don't understand that. So if you were to take the increase, the approximate cost of an increase, and weigh it against their cost of freezing that tuition, then that could help answer your question as to whether or not it would be worth that investment.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about appeal letters to colleges. We're not talking about sitting down with financial aid and having a face-to-face. What we're talking about are letters. We don't believe in our experience that sitting down with a financial aid office is an effective way of negotiating with colleges. We believe the letters are really the answer. So you're going to be writing letters to possibly admissions, the financial aid office. You might be asking for more merit scholarships, need-based. You need to make sure, or athletic money, keeping in mind that D3 schools don't offer athletic scholarships. You need to make sure that you were positioning that correctly with admissions, and perhaps including the coach in the discussion. So there's different kinds of appeal letters and who you might be sending them to.
And so I'm just curious why you don't suggest going in and have a face-to-face, or kind of, I guess to me the options are an email, a face-to-face, or a phone call.
Yeah, so
how does a phone call fit in with this?
Well, I have a story that I have in my mind that I'd like to share with you. You had mentioned face-to-face, so before I forget it, because I can forget it easily, I want to mention that we had a family who decided to go in and sit down and talk to a financial aid officer about their financial package. And while they were meeting with the financial aid counselor, they said, well, let's take a look at your FAFSA. And so they sat together and went through their FAFSA. Well, they had made mistakes on their FAFSA, and financial aid saw the mistakes. Now, I don't believe in any way that they did this intentionally. Things happen, mistakes happen. It's easy to make mistakes on FAFSA. The mistakes that they found were to their detriment. They ended up losing their grant money. So that was unfortunate. That's just an example of face-to-face. I've also had people do face-to-face meetings with financial aid. They don't seem to take a face-to-face or a verbal discussion as seriously as they do when it's in paper. For some reason, when they actually see that email, it has a whole different meaning. They seem to take it more seriously. And I also think that they pass it along to their appeals committee to be discussed and reviewed as well.
Okay, interesting. And what about, I'm just going to throw out, about like an actual, I know this is crazy these days, but an actual letter in the physical mail? Does that matter?
So we used to do that. We did that for many, many years. We would write the letter, send it to the family, have them sign it, and put it in overnight mail to them. That's how we used to do it for years. And now we have found that an email is, and obviously you've got to have the right technique and all, but the email is just as effective.
Okay. And I know you kind of went through who to send, that you should contact admissions, financial aid, but are there, if your child only got merit money, I guess I'm thinking about the type of money you received and how does that match who you should be contacting?
So if your student has not received any grant money, that means they did not qualify for need-based aid. So don't send the letter to financial aid. Send it to admissions. And you've got to send it to a pretty high-level person.
Oh, that's a good point. So should they send it to like director of admissions, or what about a lot of times these days, who the rep is, the admissions rep for your area. Should you send it?
You can send it to your rep, but I would suggest the higher the better. The director would probably be that would be our choice. Mm-hmm. And then if the student qualifies for need and they have a grant in their financial aid package, their letter could request additional need-based aid. But typically, if you request additional need-based aid, you have to have a good reason. There has to be an underlying reason why you would ask for more need-based aid.
So basically, if you're asking for more need-based aid, you have to kind of look back almost at what information you gave in your FAFSA and say, did something change, right? From what you gave.
Typically either something doesn't change, right? Typically things don't change, or there's something else going on. There could be medical reasons. There could be medical expenses that you want to bring to the attention of financial aid, or someone could have lost their job. There could be a death in the family. Those could be financial reasons. Or maybe there's another hardship that you want to bring to their attention. Colleges are usually very open to that and very flexible.
Well, that kind of goes a little bit to what's happening, in the world today, because there've definitely been posts in our Facebook group about some parents, unfortunately, already being laid off, and getting concerned of what that's going to mean to their financial aid. So in that situation, if they've truly, their work situation has changed and they don't have that income coming back in, that's a true change in their situation, and they should use that to appeal, correct?
It could be. It depends how permanent the situation is or how recent the situation is. If somebody just lost their job, they would want to be able to see proof that this is going to be a permanent situation.
Okay. And what if a student got an athletic scholarship, or somehow the coach was somehow involved in some of this?
Okay.
Would you just go back to the coach? Would you include them in the other communications that are going on?
Oh, I would not just go back to the coach. I would recommend that they send the letter directly to admissions or financial aid, depending upon their situation, and I would copy the coach. I would want them to be aware of it, because you can bet that they're going to be talking.
Okay, here's a good question from Vicki. Some colleges have an appeal form. Do you recommend sending a letter in addition to the form? Can that help or hurt?
Good question. Some colleges do have their own appeal process. And I mean, recently we wrote a letter on behalf of a student to a college that we didn't realize required a form. So that was easy enough to correct. They just took the letter and copied it into the form, and then they attached the appropriate documentation to the form. So if they do have a process or a form, I would abide by their process for sure.
Okay, so that's actually maybe the first step, is people should check the college website directly, or if you're unsure, maybe call the college and say, what is your process for appeal?
Absolutely. Yeah. Remember, you're the consumer. You can call and ask any question you want.
Oh, I'm glad you used that word. I tell people that all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question. I've made an appeal for additional merit, but was told the college always gives their best offer to their admitted students. Would you continue to pursue?
Was the student, I'm confused. So is the student not admitted yet?
I'm assuming they were, otherwise they wouldn't have gotten the merit money.
So, but it says it gives their best offer to their admitted students. Have they already submitted deposit, enrollment deposit? I
Uh,
wonder.
what's your recommendation about that, about submitting enrollment deposits versus when to
Well,
appeal?
so typically, I would recommend that an appeal letter be written before the enrollment deposit because, obviously you haven't committed yet and they want you to commit. And then you have to keep in mind that some colleges need those seats to be filled. They're more, I don't like the word used, desperate. They're more eager to have students fill those seats. Then some colleges might not be in that position where they really need to respond favorably to appeals and have those seats filled. I did have a student very recently who applied early decision to a college and had not even yet let the other colleges know. I received a financial package um, from another college, and we quickly wrote an appeal letter on their behalf, sent it back to that college that he had already been admitted to early decision, received a beautiful package. We asked for more and we got it. So it was very exciting. I would say that that's probably not typical, but you know what? If you think there's an opportunity there, I would go for it. Give it a try.
And what's your feeling? I mean, I've kind of heard that. I mean, again, there's no rush to deposit. I mean, there might be, you might feel a little pressure because of housing situations,
Mhm.
but you technically have till May 1st, and we'll talk about that because some of that might be being extended at some schools. Um,
Right.
but people sometimes believe that maybe the longer they wait, there actually might be more money that frees up because as other students decide that they're not coming, and if those students had received merit offers, then kind of that money goes back into the pot.
Yeah, there's so much. That's such a loaded statement. And we've seen so many changes. So, in previous years, we have been writing appeal. We have actually have something we call our appeal season. So we're writing appeal letters for families up until April 28th. It's incredible. It gets really intense. This year, we have found that the earlier that we write the appeal letters, they've been extremely successful. So it just depends on the college. It depends how quickly they fill their seats. It depends how, if you look on the college website and see how many students apply, like if there's 30,000 students that apply and there's only a 15% admit rate, then chances are the chances of your appeal letter being successful could be low, and they might not have an issue or a need to fill the seats as desperately as some schools. So timing depends on the school and what they need to fill the seats with.
Okay, good advice. Okay, let's go on.
Are you
Oh,
ready
go
for me?
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did want to mention too that I'll go ahead and mention one of the schools, Clarkson University. They do, they last year they established a deadline and said, okay, after, I don't remember what the date was, it was probably something in March. Okay, after March such and such, we're no longer going to be accepting appeals. So they were extremely generous early on, and they finally said, okay, we're done because they probably had offered all the funds that they could. So does an appeal letter always make sense? Not always. Some colleges are not open to the appeal process. I would say the more selective the university, the less likely it is that they're going to respond favorably to an appeal letter, because they don't need to. They have a lot of applications, they have a low admit rate, they have the top students applying and being admitted, and they just don't need to respond favorably to an appeal letter. Um, so other competitive offers. Um, it's important that during the application process that you have other offers that are competitive. We call those leverage schools. So that's important, that when you take a look, and this is another reason why the out-of-pocket costs are important. So when I mentioned out-of-pocket, what you're not comparing is you're not comparing the amount of scholarships. You're comparing the out-of-pocket costs. When you're considering writing an appeal letter to a college, when you want to use the leverage, it's got to be college A against college B, and college B having a lower out-of-pocket cost, and that's what you'll choose to write your appeal letter with as a leverage. Now, Have there been any changes to or mistakes on the FAFSA? If you have found that since you received the financial aid package for your student, that you realize that there was a mistake on the FAFSA to your benefit, and that your student, your EFC perhaps has decreased as a result of that mistake that you found on the FAFSA, it would be a good opportunity for you to go forward, submit an appeal along with an explanation to financial aid, and request additional need-based aid. I mentioned this earlier. If there was any medical problems, any medical expenses, that you'd be prepared to document them for sure. But if there was a death of a parent, an appeal would be appropriate, not just at this point in the process when your students are applying or are considering financial aid packages, but while your student is in college. If anything should change while your student is in college, you are very welcome, and I encourage you to write an appeal letter to the college and let them know, along with some supporting documentation, because you could have grounds for an appeal and receive additional funding.
Yeah, no, that's very important. I did have a question. Okay. Let me show this question from Vicki. Should the appeal letter come from the parents or the student?
In our experience, sometimes we've written appeal letters from students. I would say the majority of the time that the appeal letter will come from the parents, at least the initial letter.
Oh, I remember what I was going to ask, Brenda.
Okay.
You mentioned a leverage school.
Right.
There might, and I know that there actually are some families that are watching that have 11th graders, so they still have the opportunity to include that leverage school in the admissions process. Maybe just talk a tiny bit more about how would they, what would they consider a leverage school? Like if they're kind of coming up with the list of schools that their students should apply to, like what should they look for to include as, quote, that, school that they could potentially use down the road as, to show for an appeal purpose?
Okay, so a leverage school in our terms is a school that the student would apply to that is equally as selective as the top couple of schools that the student is interested in. And that leverage school would likely offer a financial package which would result in a lower out-of-pocket cost. But equally as selective is a very key term here, an important component.
So that's good to know for students who are still putting their list together for next year who are juniors. But it's also, I guess, important whether or not you thought that way, if your child's a senior, but you could still look at the schools that they were accepted to and maybe pull the one that is most similar in selectivity and kind of compare the offers and use that as leverage.
Correct. And when I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. When we're working with our students to work on the college search to help identify colleges we believe that are a good fit for our students, we identify leverage schools for our students. And so they apply to, a student might come back and say, well, gosh, I'm not sure that I want to go to that school. And I say to them, you don't have to go to that school, but you need to apply to that school, because this school is an excellent leverage against the number one school that you're interested in. And if they offer you an excellent package and the out-of-pocket cost is less, we could use this school as a leverage school with your number one school. So that's really important.
So that's why it's important, like that you approach the admissions process really strategically. That's being strategic.
Correct. Yep. That's what we do is we make sure that they have a leverage school or more, maybe more than one, in the mix of their colleges that they're interested in applying to.
Okay. Let's go on.
Could you press enter one more time?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. We had a little transition going on there. So some of the considerations, and I'll tell you right now, we're going through this with our seniors right now. So when we are working with a student, identifying what colleges we will write an appeal letter to, we ask the student to identify their top college choice. Now, there could be a couple of them. We don't write appeal letters to all of their colleges. We have them choose their top two colleges, we will let them know if their colleges are favorable to appeals. We let them know that early on. As we're looking at the whole college search process, we will let them know if those colleges are open to the appeal process. It's all a part of setting a budget, establishing what their budget is, and looking at the out-of-pocket cost to determine if these colleges make sense to them. But we will write in a letter to the top 1 or 2 top colleges, and just what you mentioned earlier, we need to identify what the college's appeal policy is. What are their requirements? This is what parents should do. Find out what their requirements are. Do they have a form? What are the deadlines? And what are any restrictions around their appeal process and their policy? Making a phone call to admissions or financial aid is a great way to get an answer to those questions.
So do you have any sense, like on the college side, when they receive those letters, and particularly, I mean, ultimately, they want that student, well, first of all, they've already given the student an acceptance, right? So they want them now to come. So, and when they see something that says, you are my top choice, is it even worth like saying, if I can, if you can help me close the gap, this is my top choice, I know I'll attend.
So help me understand what your question is.
I'm just curious if you have any sense from the college side, if that's something that kind of
so when they receive these letters, first of all, they're very used to receiving these letters. They're not, they have committees now that are assigned to reviewing appeal letters and evaluating them. So they're used to that. And yes, they've admitted your student. Some colleges I had mentioned earlier are in a higher need. They have a higher need to fill the seats. They need to fill seats more than some colleges do. So if they find that they need to fill the seats, maybe they're a little low on numbers right now, they might be more favorable to respond quickly. By the way, they would usually respond pretty quickly. They might be more apt to respond quickly and favorably to an appeal letter. If they don't really need to fill the seats and they know that they've got plenty of applicants, they might not respond as favorably.
There's a question here. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, but I think it's worth maybe highlighting. Cheryl's asking, when calculating the increase of a 3 to 6%, is that on tuition and room and board?
We see increases on all of those. When we calculate the increase, we usually estimate it on the tuition and fees, but we do see increases in all of those. So you could, for your own purposes, estimate 3% on tuition, room, and board. I think it would be a safe bet.
I was going to say it would probably be safe, and you're just adding a little cushion in case it doesn't work out that way.
That's correct.
Eric's asking, are there schools that are more willing to give money through appeals? Like, is that something that maybe, you might know over time?
Yeah, well, so we do, because we keep a database of them. As you can imagine, for the last 15 years, we've been writing appeal letters, and every appeal letter that we write, we log in our database. We indicate who we're sending the appeal letter to, how much we're asking, how much we get. And when we do get a positive response, we're very excited for the family, because we multiply that times 4. Because when they receive, if we ask for $5,000 more a year and they give us 5, that's worth $20,000 to our families. And that's an important number for them to keep in mind, and certainly for us as well, because it shows what a high success rate we have.
And do you see a general range of what schools are willing, like, is it like kind of on average a few $1,000s? You ever see something like where a school is willing to change what they're offered by $10,000?
Oh, I would say 10,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
So just recently we wrote a letter for a family, and we wrote the letter, and I think we asked around 5,000, and the father came back and said, well, 5,000? My daughter can't go to that school for $5,000 more a year. We can't afford it unless it's $15,000 more a year. And I said, well, if you ask 15, you're not going to get it. And he said, well, I think we're going to ask 15 anyway, because she's not going to go there if we don't get the 15. And I said, well, you're never going to get anything in life if you don't ask for it. So go for it. And he did. They didn't get it. So, but you know what? It's then time to make a wise financial decision. If parents can be committed to making that decision and not allowing their child to go to a college that's outside of their budget, and they don't get the money they need from an appeal, then good for them.
So I guess I wanted to bring it up is that, it's worth appealing and it's worth trying, and there's probably a high probability, depending on the school, that you will get some. But if you've got this gap of, as you said, $15,000 or $20,000, you're not realistic if you think that the financial aid appeal is going to, close a $20,000 gap.
That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Sorry.
I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Okay. I just want people to be realistic when they're doing these appeals. I mean, definitely do them. It's worthwhile. But if you see you already have a big gap like that, it's just this appeal is not going to be the way that you're going to, be financially able to afford that school or not.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Let's go. Keep moving.
Okay. The appeal letter. There's a technique. And you need to be careful. You need to keep in mind that these people are busy. You need to keep in mind that you're a consumer. So you need to be assertive. And yet you may have to make sure that the content that's included in the appeal letter is relevant, that you have a good argument. Maybe say something positive about your student, the kind of student they are. Remind them of some background information about the student. The amount that's requested is very important for positive results. We've talked a little bit about that. Don't ask for too much. Don't ask for something that's unrealistic. Be very specific in the amount that you want to ask for. Don't just ask them to meet the gap between college A and B, because chances are that won't happen. Be careful of your word choice and your tone. Be respectful. Be grateful for the scholarship that's already been received, and be humble. We're very careful when we write our letters, and we're writing them on behalf of our parents. So when we write these letters, we're writing them as though we are mom and dad, and we tell them we are so excited that our student's been admitted, and we're specific as to how much we want, and we're clear. So the result could be thousands of dollars, it could be $1,000, but 1,000 times 4 will be $4,000, and it certainly pay for the books over the next 4 years and some personal expenses. And of course, you can always seek the assistance of an expert to write those appeal letters.
So I'm curious about the comment about asking for specific dollar amounts.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that that's very important, that families in the letter need to kind of say, we need, $5,000 more to really make this feasible, or as opposed to just saying, we have a big gap and I have another offer, and is there anything else more that college A can you do for us?
We believe that would be too vague. Yes, we're very specific, and 15 years of being very specific as to the amount that we ask for. We believe that's the answer. Correct. That's the approach that should be taken.
We did mention this, but I'm just repeating it because I see people are asking a lot, and they may not have heard it earlier about
okay.
The parent or the student write the letter.
So the initial letter we write on behalf of the parents. So the initial appeal letter comes from the parents. There's been some occasions where the student has written the letter, and there's been a couple of situations where it seemed very clear that the student should write the letter, but I would say that 99% of the letters that are written, we write on behalf of the parents.
Here's a question from Melissa. Do you need to have a dramatic reason to appeal, or can it just simply be that you cannot afford, I'm assuming in this case she's writing EFC, or you just cannot afford the college after what they've originally given? So
you don't have to have a dramatic reason. A dramatic reason, I'm assuming you mean something like a loss of a job or medical expenses, that they could be considered dramatic, or very powerful reasons. You don't have to have a dramatic reason. But if you come back and just say that I can't afford my EFC or I can't afford the financial package, they hear that all the time. I know. I would imagine if I worked in a financial aid office, I probably want to give money. I would feel so badly for families, but I would imagine when you work for a financial aid office, you have to kind of remove yourself from the emotions of the families because, they're a business and they can't approve every financial aid letter. And most families who receive a financial aid package probably can't afford their expected family contributions. So, but I would go ahead and if you think you have a case, whether it's about your student and their GPA or their test scores or them just being awesome, write a letter and see what you can do.
Okay, Christine has a really important question. Does the school expect you to take the Stafford loans first prior to possible additional aid being awarded?
So yes, I'm going to answer that question. Hopefully you can understand this, but if your student has received a financial aid package and you think you need more need-based money like a grant, your student will need to take those loans. They probably will not offer any additional grant money if you say, no, I don't want those loans. So, and our experience is that the student must take those government loans if they would like grant, if they want to receive the grant money or additional grant money. Yes.
And we didn't really touch on Parent Plus loan, which is sometimes included in the financial aid letter. You want to make any comments about that?
Yes. So on a financial aid, I could go on and on about all kinds of loans. So on a financial aid letter, in addition to the scholarships and the grants and the work study and the direct student loans, you may also see listed on the financial package a Parent Plus loan. Parent Plus loans are loans, as we know. Colleges will include them as aid and include them as aid. Don't be fooled by that. Be careful. There are other types of loans that you may need to, and we encourage you to research before you accept the Parent Plus loan. The Parent Plus loan listed on the financial package is a very easy loan to get. As long as you've submitted a FAFSA, chances are if parents apply for a Parent Plus loan, it takes about 20 minutes and you probably will have the loan. Keep in mind, that is a parent loan. It is not a student loan. You are responsible, mom and dad, for making those loan payments when your student graduates. You might have a deal made with your student, an agreement that your student will pay for them. But in the end, if they can't pay for them, you will have to pay for those loans. The Parent Plus loan has a high origination fee of about 4%, and the interest rate is over 7%. So we encourage you to research the different types of private loans to see if you can come up with a less expensive loan than the Parent Plus loan as your first option.
Okay, switching a little bit. Trish is asking or saying that they were told by the admissions folk that the letters should absolutely come from their son, but should they follow up at some point with a letter from the parents?
So if someone from admissions has told you specifically the letter should come from the son, I would follow their directions. I've never heard a college say that. However, I've never asked a college what they want us to do. I've asked them, what is your process? Because we want to make sure we follow their process, whether they have special forms or an appeal process. But yeah, I would say typically we send it from the parents, but if you got feedback from a college and they said that the student should send it, then follow, I would honor that request and their procedure and have the student write the letter.
Okay, Susan's asking if you received both merit and need-based aid, which one is the better basis for appeal?
That's a good question. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question is that when you write the letter, you could ask for additional and again, specific amount in either grants or scholarships and make sure you copy both the financial aid department and admissions and see which one will offer you some additional funding.
So let me ask this question. It hasn't come up yet. does the college have any flexibility in when they give out the Stafford loan? They give out a subsidized and unsubsidized amount. Do they have any flexibility in changing, how much they gave as subsidized versus unsubsidized? Is that another way of maybe helping this, the family?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up because only recently that topic has come up here in our company. That is certainly something that you could ask for. People really need to, most people don't ask for that because they don't understand what that really means.
Right.
So when a student is offered on the financial package, first of all, let's go back to the government loan. A student can receive $5,500 the first year in a government loan, and it can increase a little bit each year thereafter, but let's focus on the first year. So the first year, if the student qualifies for some need based upon the FAFSA, that $5,500 could be divided. It could be $3,000 in subsidized and $2,500 in unsubsidized. So what does that mean? Subsidized means that the interest is accruing on that loan is covered by the government while they're in college. They don't need to worry about that interest accruing. But on the unsubsidized portion of that interest starts as soon as that money is dispersed to the student, and it starts to accumulate. And so what you could do is go back and appeal to the college and ask them if they could perhaps maybe increase the amount of the subsidized. You could do that. That's something that I know that we've talked about here at College Assistance Plus. Typically, we're usually asking for larger amounts, and we just want to see that number come in. But it's certainly a possibility to do that. And
I feel like every little bit can help. So
yeah, that could be something that could work. I know that the interest that accumulates, if your student loan is purely an unsubsidized student loan over the course of 4 years, we're talking about $2,000 to $3,000 of interest. So it could definitely help.
Okay, here's a question from Olivia. They have twins. I know a lot of people who are in that situation with multiple students or multiple kids. Do you have to write an appeal per child, or can you write an appeal for multiple children at the same time if they're attending the same school?
Wow, that's a good question. We have had that situation, and the letter that we wrote was separate. We wrote a letter to the school for each child.
Okay. We definitely have more questions. We're going to cycle through, but let's just see what else. Okay, is next to this.
Okay. So this is the final slide that I'm going to be covering, and it really talks about how you can write your own appeal letter, because you can write your own appeal letter. The approach you take is very, very important. And I talked a lot about those details in the information that I shared with you today. Who the appeal letter, who you send it to is critical, whether you send it to financial aid or whether you send it to admissions. Who should you copy on that letter? Who are some contacts that you have at that school that you think could help benefit the results of the appeal letter? That's also important. Suggestions on what amount you should ask for. We talked about that. Don't go overboard, be realistic. And again, you're going to want to compare the out-of-pocket costs of the college that you're looking at, number one school, to the leverage school, a college that is equally as selective. And I write your appeal letter according to that. In the verbiage that should be included. We use, in our appeal letters, we use pretty strong language. It's not offensive, but it's assertive. It's not aggressive, but it's very assertive. We never let them know that the school we let them know that it's a very important school to them, but they might consider the other one if they can't come through. We're pretty, and parents are scared to do that. They're afraid because they're afraid they're gonna pull their acceptance letter, which isn't gonna happen. And make sure that all of the attachments or supplemental documents that you refer to in the appeal letter are included or attached to the letter. And there's more information we actually go through in detail how you can write your own appeal letter in the webinar that we're going to be holding this Thursday night at
Right.
8 o'clock. I'm sure you're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, we scheduled this webinar for Thursday because it's timely, and a lot of people have gotten their students offers, their merit scholarship, their financial aid offers, and now's the time to start, if you haven't already, start figuring out how you're going to write that appeal. And I don't know, Brenda, if you want, I mean, so this is a very reasonable workshop. I mean, you guys work one-on-one with families and usually charge $500, right, to write their letter.
Right. Correct.
So, this is an opportunity to kind of get really similar value or similar information at a much, much, lower value. So they're going to really walk through how they would do it, for a client, and you're going to get the benefit of that in a workshop.
Yeah, and the other thing that we'll be doing in the workshop is we'll be giving you some of those statements that we use, how you address it, who you write it to, what approach you should take. I mentioned some of the verbiage that's used, and that we use strong language, and yet we're humble and we're assertive, but we're also polite and we're respectful. And we'll be glad to provide you with some samples of those as well.
Okay, great. So we're going to put the link in the comments if you want to sign up now. If you guys have been following, me, I send out reminders just because life is busy. So you'll get reminders about this as it gets closer to Thursday. But if you just want to kind of check it off of your, list right now and sign up, I think that would just be easier for you as well. And I'm going to go back to some of the questions from before because there were a lot that came through, and we'll just see how far we get for a little bit longer about some of the questions. Okay, so Fred's asking, if your child received the top published merit amount, is it worth asking for more?
Yes. It is. I've done it. I've seen top published merit, and I figure, why not, right? And sometimes we're successful. So the answer to your question is yes, and you don't have to worry that they're going to take any of it away. So I would say yes, please, as long as you have a leverage and you've got a good, solid reason to do so. I mean, if they receive the top published merit, I'm assuming that the student's a very high performing student, and you can remind them of that.
That's great advice. I love that. So Christy's asking, this is interesting. If they appealed for more need-based aid and they didn't get it, should they also apply for merit money? And maybe even to just broaden the question, should you appeal for both of that at the same time, or should they be two separate letters?
Yeah, so we usually, when we write a letter to a college, if we know that the student or the family, they qualify for a need-based, we usually ask if we could ask for more merit or grant money. So we ask for, could you offer some additional money in terms of merit or need-based aid? So we can ask for either. So then back to the question about if you've asked for more need-based and you got turned down and you want to go back and ask for merit, I don't think that's a bad idea, because they might not be talking to each other, financial aid and admissions, and it's not going to hurt, because even if they are talking to each other and they realize that you already asked for need-based aid, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're only going to tell you no. The best that could happen is they could tell you yes. So I would say, don't be afraid, give it a try.
And so going back to that situation where somebody or family is asking for merit and need, and let's say they do it in the same letter, should they send two separate emails, one to the financial aid, or or basically, I mean, one email and to both financial aid and admissions?
You could write the letter to admissions and copy financial aid. Yeah, you could do that, and they'll probably. I know that financial aid, and it depends on the college, but I know that financial aid and admissions talk to each other a lot. They don't always. Some colleges have completely separate procedures. They might talk to each other. But you can send it to both and then just see what happens.
Okay, Linda is asking, and a lot of families may still be in this situation. We haven't received the financial aid package yet. How soon after receiving do you suggest we send an appeal?
Okay, so the answer to the question is that as soon as you receive the financial aid package from your top school and a leverage school, is the time to send the appeal letter. No need to wait.
And if schools haven't sent their aid package yet, like when do you have a general sense of when you see most of them send them by? I mean, it's got to be by April 1st.
So last year, it was interesting. Last year, we saw a lot of financial packages come in early April. So we were writing appeal letters. It was a very busy season for us through April. So it could be early April. I know that everybody's dying to know, especially with the current situation with the virus and the closing of colleges or going to online. It could be kind of a crazy time for them. So if you want an answer to the question as to when you might receive it, you could Google it and see if you can find an answer as to when you might expect to receive it. You could also send an email to financial aid to find out when you might expect it, but they could come as late as early April or mid-April.
So we haven't addressed elephant in the room, which is the virus. And I'll just kind of say that I have seen colleges starting to announce that they are moving their May 1st decision date to June 1st. It is not across the board. It is college specific, specific to each college. So have you started to see any of that, Brenda?
So I've started, just like you said, some of the colleges have made that decision. Some of them haven't even discussed it yet. I think that this is hitting them all so soon. We're in a position of just making changes and decisions, and a lot of the colleges are responding to trying to figure out how they're going to change their platform to online learning. And so a lot of decisions just haven't been formulated yet, just because of. But I would keep an eye on it for sure, and we will as well.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye on it. My gut is that if there's, a high enough percentage of colleges that are moving to June 1st, they all probably will, because they don't want to be the one who, stayed at May 1st and they might, lose out from a family deciding because they didn't have enough time. So just be on the lookout. We actually started a thread in the Paying for College 101 Facebook group with any colleges that we know of. So we'll, keep updating that thread. But, and this is actually maybe a good point. Make sure your student is looking at their email, right? Because if a college decides to change that deadline, they're probably going to notify the student through their email.
Always a good idea to remind their students to look at their emails. They could be financial, they could be admissions, they could be changes to the national commitment deadline of May 1st. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm just going to go back to see if there's any big questions that we might have missed. This is interesting. Tammy's asking, is there a way to research, but I'm assuming the maximum merit award offered by a particular school?
There used to be that colleges would sort of advertise, they would list those merit awards on their websites. We're not seeing that so much anymore. So the only thing really that we have to rely on is our database, because we luckily have kept track of, over the years, the colleges, the GPA, the test scores of our students who've applied to colleges, who've been admitted and been awarded need-based, merit scholarships, and how much those scholarships are. So we're able to see what the highest scholarships are for students. So we kind of know how much more we can ask for an appeal letter based upon what we've seen as a top scholarship at some of those schools. Some schools do list them, but more and more aren't advertising them anymore.
Okay. Okay, Olivia's asking, this is a bit off topic, but do you recommend a way for students to make a decision on a school if they can't get a tour before the deadline? This, I'm sure, is going to apply to a lot of students.
So I would suggest, again, watch that deadline, right? To see if they're going to extend that deadline at all, because there might be an opportunity. We don't know what the future brings. It could change. In the meantime, I'm sorry, I have to look at that question again, but had they visited it once?
We don't know. That's a good
No, not
question.
at all.
Yeah.
So, online virtual tours, we've got, there are resources online. We've got resources where they can actually visit the schools virtually and look at different videos to get a feel for the school. So that's what I would recommend at this point. They could take a drive through. Obviously, you can't visit schools at this point in time. But we've got some resources on hand for students. We've got websites, we've got videos that they can see. At this point in time, that's really all they can do.
Yeah, I just read an article today that
Mhm.
some schools, and again, this is why it's going to be important to, check your students' emails and even go back to the admissions page itself at the
Mhm.
schools. I saw that some schools were actually offering to set up Zoom calls with
Right,
existing students. So some of the colleges are trying to figure out ways. They know that this is an issue, and they're trying to figure out ways of how they can help those students who still need more information before they decide whether to attend or not. So,
right.
so check your emails, go back to the school's website, and you know what? And send an email. Maybe there's something that the school can do in terms of, even if they don't have it on their website, maybe they can set your student up with an existing college student that they can talk to.
Right. And another thing that I was just talking to a young lady today, one of my students, and she's focused on a particular program. And I also encouraged her, as much as you want to go and visit the colleges and look at the campuses and see how pretty they are and look at the rooms and all and get a feel for it, it's also important. And this is what the juniors can be doing at this point in time, making sure that the program is a strong program and understanding what features and aspects of a program make it strong. So I was working with a student today who's got like 20 schools on her list, but I said, since you can't get out there to visit right now, let's focus on the program itself. And let's look at the strength of the program. Let's look at the end results of a student who attends these colleges. What happens to them when they graduate? Because after all, when they graduate, you got to find a job. So what does that look like? And also the curriculum. Take a look at the curriculum of a particular college program, because those courses that you're going to be taking can make all the difference in the world for your interest levels. So that's some of the research they can be doing right now at the colleges.
Okay, one last question. Alexandra's asking, would asking for $10,000 in aid be outlandish if the initial offer uses $25,000 a year in Parent Plus loans to meet the demonstrated need?
Well, I think it's outlandish that they've included $25,000 a year in a Parent Plus loan on the financial aid package and called it aid. So that's outlandish. So do I think you'd be outlandish for asking for $10,000 more? No, not at all. If that's what it's going to take for your student to attend, hopefully you've got some pretty solid grounds to be asking for $10,000 more. I would go ahead and go for it. And if your student can't attend unless you get that $10,000 more in aid, then stick with your decision and go for it. Can't hurt. It's certainly not going to hurt.
Here's an interesting question, which we didn't touch on, but are appeals different for transfer students?
I would say, as a rule, yes. Um, First of all, scholarships can be very different. Financial packages can be very different for transfer students. Typically, what we see are scholarships, transfer scholarships are not as great as first-time freshman students. So that would mean that the financial aid package in general just isn't going to be as favorable as a first-time freshman. that doesn't mean you should not appeal. I have written appeal letters to colleges for transfer students, and I have received favorable results. So I would definitely give it a shot.
Okay, this is the last one I'm going to show. And I'll read the question. I think it actually brings up another issue which we didn't touch on, which I'll comment. So Allie's asking, my son was offered an in-state tuition waiver and a $7,000 a year through the School of Music at his top choice. That gets tuition down significantly, but room and board, it's still around $10,000 a year. Could we appeal to possibly get additional aid? Would it be through the admissions? Maybe you can address this question, but the thing that this also brings up is that, is it worth for some schools to maybe ask to get in-state tuition? Like, could that be the thing you ask for if you're an out-of-state student?
Well, I'd have to look at this question again, but I was under the impression, oh, we got an in-state. I don't know what their bottom line cost is here. They got the room and board down to $10,000 a year. So I'm not sure what their bottom line cost is at that school. I'd be curious to find out what that is. If you're going to ask for any help with room and board, you need to send it to financial aid. But again, I'd want to know what the bottom line cost is to see if the total out-of-pocket cost for this school is reasonable. Perhaps they could be content and be satisfied with the package. It looks like they've offered a wonderful package to the student, but I don't know what the bottom line cost is, or if it's within their budget. If it's not within their budget and their students simply can't attend, you certainly can ask for more money in terms of.
Allie is saying it was $4,000 for tuition that it came down to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm hearing a package that's amazing.
Yeah.
And if I were you, I would be incredibly grateful for that package.
But what about the idea of potentially getting, out-of-state tuition waived to get in-state tuition as something to ask for?
You can ask for it if you have a truly outstanding student academically. It certainly can't hurt. I would also make sure you spend a lot of time looking on their website for any scholarship opportunities that they have, that make sure you haven't missed anything. You can certainly request that they offer you that in-state tuition waiver. It can't hurt to ask, but I would imagine you'd have to have a very, very strong student academically to make that request.
Okay, well, Brenda, this was great. This was a lot of great information. We've gone for like over an hour and 20 minutes, and we could probably keep going. But I really appreciate your time, your experience, your knowledge. And I'll just, mention one more time, and people will get reminders if you want to really, get detailed and expert advice about how to write that letter. I think tonight we talked a lot about the different situations, about why you would appeal, the general approach, all really helpful. But if you want to get into the nitty gritty of what your letter should say, then consider coming to the workshop on Thursday at 8 p.m. And you'll get reminders about that. But I think, we learned a lot tonight, Brenda, and I really thank you for your time and your expertise.
It was my pleasure. You're welcome. Good luck to everyone.
Yes, good luck. Okay, good night, everybody.